Hello everybody. So I wanted to film a quick tutorial on a very specific strength-based asana, the Chaturanga Dadasana. That's our high plank to slow lower. We often perform Chaturanga Dadasana during our shortened vinyasa periods where we move from high plank, lowering in Chaturanga Dadasana to our bellies or to the mat, lifting into upward facing dog, and then lifting our hips from upward facing dog into downward facing dog. A lot of times if you're new to yoga, it's very simple to just let your hips and belly kind of drop to the mat as you lower from high plank and lift into either cobra or upward facing dog. And as a yoga instructor, I don't generally correct that because most haven't been taught correctly how to perform the actual asana, which is that lowering called Chaturanga Dadasana. So I'm going to teach that today so that you can practice it anytime you're moving through that shortened vinyasa pose between our high plank to upward facing dog. I am going to show various modifications and variations, and I'm going to use props to help make it clear that we're in the correct positioning. So if you have yoga blocks, I'm going to be using just one, but you can also position both of them on either side of you to make sure you're performing the pose correctly. So as I mentioned before, we're going to find ourselves first off in high plank. Anytime you're performing Chaturanga Dadasana, I highly recommend moving through your wrist warm-up exercises first. Most people would do this throughout their yoga flow, so it's not something that I'm gonna spend a lot of time showing here, but just make sure your wrists are nice and warmed up before entering the pose. We're gonna start with our hands shoulder width apart in our high plank position. Now that can be done from your toes or from your knees, but if you're going to hold the knee modification, we want to make sure those hips are low and we have a nice straight line from our knees all the way up to our shoulders. I see a lot of students make the mistake of doing this kind of pose and they kind of hold their hips and shoulders back and try to lower down, and that's going to be very difficult to perform a correct Chaturanga Dadasana. So, high plank to a slow lower. Like I said, most people initially just kind of lower down to the mat and lift into the cobra, okay? Or even if you're on your knees, you kind of low and lift. We want a really nice, slow, controlled lower, and to get that, we also want to make sure we're shifting our weight forward. That is the essential difference between just lowering to our mat from that high plank, almost like a push-up position, to a true Chaturanga Dadasana. So let's demonstrate that once again. 1 second. Now, I'm going to find myself in my high plank position. If I'm not leaning forward, I would just lower like so. But shifting the weight forward takes our weight from our balls of our feet onto as light as we can get our toes. So already I'm having to work a lot harder to shift that weight forward. So it's a good kind of drill to practice, shifting back, shifting forward, shifting back, shifting forward, shifting back, shifting forward. That's a wonderful way to practice gaining strength in those wrists and that upper body to perform a very clear and aligned chaturanga. Now I'm going to start by using this block next. I'm going to place my block right behind my lower arm, so right behind my forearm. So you can see here, I can feel that block, I can touch it. I'm on my knees here in a nice high plank. I could also be on my toes. If I did not shift forward, watch what happens when I lower down to the mat. See how the block moves? Like so, even if I'm on my knees. If I don't shift forward and I just lower down, that block moves, okay? So the shift forward is what creates our positioning for a correct chaturanga. Shifting forward, lowering down, lifting up into upward facing dog. The block stays right where it is because I kept my arms straight by shifting that weight forward, allowing me to lower at a 90-degree angle. When I don't shift forward, you can see the elbow starts to bend and really collapse, and I don't get that nice straight line that I was wanting for my Chaturanga Dadasana. Now, the other part of Chaturanga that I've been demonstrating but haven't talked about is how I'm keeping my elbows very close to my body. So when you lower in Chaturanga Dadasana, you want to be able to feel your rib cage on the elbows. A lot of people, when they first enter yoga, they do push-ups with very wide hands and wide elbows, like so. We want to bring those elbows around so that we're kind of almost like pulling our shoulder blades together behind our back, letting those elbows really hug that rib cage and keeping those shoulder blades nice and tight together. I always tell people, act like they're holding like a ball or a walnut between their shoulder blades as they lower down. That's gonna keep those elbows glued in. I always tell people, don't do chicken wings. We don't want nice wide elbows. We want those elbows nice and close to the body. So I'm gonna demonstrate it one more time. I'm gonna put the block on this side so you guys can see this arm as it moves. I'm in that position. I shift forward, elbows are close to my body, and I lower down, lifting up into upward facing dog, following that pose, exhaling into that downward facing dog. Okay, I'll show it one final time, this time with the block on this side so you can see how that arm stays straight and from my knees. So the only difference being on the knees is you have to really emphasize that shift forward, maybe by even kind of like leaning out a bit, but you can still get from the knees that release down and that lift into that upward facing dog. Once again, okay? Awesome work, guys. Continue to practice those chaturangas. It will make you a bit fatigued in that anterior deltoid, but it'll also make that area much, much stronger. It's also gonna help with flexibility and strength in that forearm as well. So keep working at it, and pretty soon that will feel just like second nature to you, okay? Thanks so much.